Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Better Together podcast. I'm Shawn Sundsvold, your host for today. And as always, I'm joined by my partner in life and in business, Kelly Sundsvold. This podcast is all about real conversations with business owners who are building with purpose and doing it in a way that's anything but perfect, but it's always worth it. Today, we're joined by Brian Graves, the founder and CEO of Orion 7 Solutions, a Scottsdale-based consultancy that helps growing and mid-market companies scale their customer experience with purpose, clarity, and measurable impact. Brian has spent his career leading customer service and contact center operations for some of the world's most recognized brands, including Redbox and Sprint PCS. He's led teams from a few dozen agents to thousands across the U.S. and abroad, navigating everything from the rise of offshore operations to the evolution of digital support, and now the transformation being shaped by artificial intelligence. Through Orion 7 Solutions, Brian has and helps companies turn customer insight into real business performance. His advisory work spans customer experience transformation, BPO strategy, operational design, and intelligent automation. He's also the creator of the frameworks like the Customer Difficulty Index and the Experience Friction Index, which we'll get into on this one. And it gives leaders a practical way to understand and improve the financial impact of customer experience. Finally, Brian is also the mind behind the CX Factor, a popular series unpacking how experience, design, AI, and leadership come together to build loyalty and long-term growth. Known for his straight talk, grounded leadership style, and decades of hands-on experience, Brian brings both heart and hard data to every conversation. He's passionate about the idea that technology may enable scale, but people create trust, and trust is the real engine behind every successful business. So let's get into it. Brian, welcome to the show. I'm so excited for the conversation and having you here.
I'm so glad to join you guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Like I said, we're excited. So let's just dive into it. So briefly, let's start with a quick overview of your background and what really got you started with Orion 7 Solutions.
Well, quick is I started in the contact center business back in college. I answered phones and I worked in the deceased unit for Citibank at their contact center in Las Vegas back in the early 80s. And it was a fraternity thing, right? A bunch of me and my fraternity brothers all went there and worked our way through it. And a few of us stayed in the industry. And so from there, we went up and started building different contact centers around the country, including Williams-Sonoma, Sprint PCS, and then Earthlink, Microsoft, and then finally my last big brand gig was with Redbox.
Earthlink. Wow. I
Yeah,
haven't heard that name in
there's
a
a name
while.
out of the past.
I just
Yes.
thought of my internet, like when my wife and I first got married, we had Earthlink internet. It was one of the cheaper ones on the market at the time.
Yeah.
So what got you started then with Orion 7 Solutions? What kind of brought that on?
You know what brought that on is so when I left Redbox, I was kind of looking for my next gig on what I wanted to do, and I wasn't finding anything that really excited me. And somebody called me out of the blue. They had seen the CX Factor, the stuff I was writing on there, and asked me if I was doing consulting, or the way they worded it. They said, "Are you doing channel partner or trusted advisory work?" And I was like, to tell you the truth, I don't know that I've ever heard those terms. Why don't you tell me what they are? And they explained it to me, and it was like every light in my house turned on. And so we decided to go down that path. And within 48 hours, we had found the name of what we wanted to call the organization. We had bought the URL and formed the LLC. And, it was one of those fortuitous moments that just kind of everything felt right and fell into place very quickly.
So you're about 15 months into this journey, right?
Yeah, we are a little coming into 12 months into the very beginning of the journey. We truly opened our doors and said, okay, we're looking for clients now about 6 months ago. So we're early on in getting this thing. We're still running down the runway trying to get some height to this plane.
Yeah. So many of our listeners are in the early stages of building their own businesses. It's kind of the vision behind this podcast is to share stories of, success, and it's just not all success. Sometimes it's waking up in the middle of the night and fixing a problem or whatever. Looking over this first 6 months to a year, what do you wish someone had told you about the first year in business?
Yeah, it was really how different it was going to be. Is the interesting thing was having worked for large brands, everyone came to me. It's, people were trying to sell me, people within the organization wanted me to solve the problems, and everyone came to me. Now it's me going to other people, and that is definitely a different ball game. And learning how to do that. I think the most exciting part of this is all the learning I've been going through over the last 12 months on trying to get this thing up and running. It's a very different ballgame from working for a large brand that has all the organization together to starting this
Sure.
on your own where it's just you. And then
Yeah.
maybe it's family members like the two of you, right? Is my wife helps out, my sons come in and help out, my daughters help. Luckily I have a large family. Everybody pitches in to help dad out, and
Yeah, that's great.
it's the exciting part of the whole thing. But it was definitely the crossing the table over from people coming to me going to them and learning how to do that piece of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it kind of leads into my next question here is, you've gone from being an executive, at these big companies to now being an entrepreneur, right? And having to literally figure it all out yourself. I mean, that's kind of the definition of entrepreneurship, right? Is you're figuring out your own systems and processes and all this kind of stuff. So, what mindset shifts did you have to make when going from that executive role to now entrepreneurial role?
That's a great question, and it's one of those things where systems are when you're working in these large brands, systems are just in place. You know that you've got other people picking up the slack over here, or that
Hmm.
you know where your handoffs are. The interesting thing is when you're handing off to yourself, and you're like, oh, I haven't thought about that, and so it was. That's the interesting part of being an entrepreneur, and the exciting piece of this is now I can do all the things I didn't agree with that I had to work with before. I'm like, well, now I can fix it. But then when you start to fix it, you're like, well, that's just this problem now, and then it's that problem, and it's that whole interconnectivity of the ecosystem that you're trying to build, and that you're never ready for all of it. And so you've got to at some point just take the leap and go, and I tell people all the time, we're building this plane as we fly.
Mhm.
You're doing a lot of that while you're doing that. It's one of those things where I've been working on doing outbound campaigns lately. To tell you the truth, marketing was always the bane of my existence when I was in operations. I was like, oh, the marketing guys, oh, darn it. But now I'm like, well, I should have listened more to those marketing guys.
Yeah. Yeah. We like marketing here.
Yeah, it's one of those things that as an operator, right, as I come from the operations side of it, and you'd
Yes.
sit in a room and the operation, marketing guys would go, "Oh, we did all this stuff," and you're like, "Really?" And then as an operator, and then so now you're like, "I really, I've got to reach out to some people I know and ask about these things," because I had never done marketing. I didn't know about a logo, and I didn't know about really how to establish what our brand meant for it, and it's evolved as we've been doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious, how was that process of kind of figuring out like what those handoffs to yourself looked like and kind of figuring out this is the moment that handoff should take place? And how was that process, as you built it, and how important have those SOPs become
You
as
know,
you've started getting going?
they're critical, especially as I've tried to bring family members in, right? To be really honest, my kids would look at me growing up and say, "Yeah, my dad does something in contact center," right? And then
Yeah.
as we tried to explain to them, okay, here's all the different stuff, those SOPs became really critical as I was
Mhm.
trying to teach them what their role would be. And I would say that some of it was pretty clear, and some of it just wasn't, and they didn't get it. And we had to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to give backfill data into it. And so it becomes really important. The and the other interesting part of that is that when it starts to point out where your holes are, right? As you're trying to track all this stuff, is you find, oh, I haven't thought about that yet. Let's get that going too. And that's the part when you were saying earlier about waking up in the middle of the night. You wake up in the middle of the night and you go, oh, I forgot all about that. Let me do this. And my wife will come in here sometimes in my office, and it'll be 3 a.m. and I'm out here with all the lights, only the desk lights on, pounding away and trying to figure things out. The other big benefit of this, and what's really fun about it at this time in our history, is AI has been
Mhm.
extremely valuable as a partner in running things, going, here's what I'm thinking. Poke and some of it you have to work with it to say, okay, I need you to be my challenger. Don't just tell me how great I am. I know.
Right.
Yeah.
I want you to be mean to me and challenge me on my thinking.
Mhm.
Once you get that type of relationship with it going, it becomes an invaluable piece of the or tool that you're using as you build this thing.
Yeah, for sure. Was working with something with ChatGPT this morning and they're like, "Great idea." And I was like, "No, this can't be the greatest idea."
Yeah. Like,
So
oh,
it
man,
really
you're really thinking like a founder. I don't know how many times it's told me that.
yeah.
And I'm like going, look, I've already talked to you about this. Don't tell me I have to go over and use somebody else. If I have to go to Perplexity, I will.
Yeah. I'm gonna threaten you. Yep, exactly. So on that, like, I guess a little bit different than AI, but like, how do you navigate the tension between perfectionism and momentum when you're launching your new ideas?
And that's being a perfectionist at heart, right? And just
Mhm.
the core of who I am is I love things to be exactly the way that I envision them. Here's the great benefit of coming from a large family. Nothing's ever perfect, right? As the father of 5 kids with age ranges that span 15 years, is you learn to just do. And sometimes you have to do that. And that was a big learning when I worked for Microsoft for a number of years. That was the learning that I had to have with them, is that they would just come out with things and say, we'll reiterate that on a future release, right? And you're like going, well, this is the biggest company in the world, and so you take those learnings from it, and that's kind of where I'm at. Is it's not always going to be perfect, and
Mhm.
you kind of go, and not everyone's going to notice, right? You got to get the big things right, but some of the things, like, like, what did I have? I had a spelling error or something on an article I published that was in the title,
Oh gosh. Yeah.
and a friend of mine pinged me up and said, and by the way, you've got this error in your title, and I was like, oh, and but it had been out there for so long that I couldn't correct it, and you just
Mhm.
kind of go, all right, that's a big learning, move on.
Yeah.
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 It
Yeah.
shows you. And the other nice thing about that, though, is it shows you're human, and that you're going to make mistakes, and you've got to learn how to forgive yourself on those things, and again, learn from it. Even as this beard gets wider and wider, you're still learning. You don't walk into this thing knowing everything, and so don't be afraid to go through that learning curve.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I try to make a goal. I joke with it about my kids, but I learn something new every day, right? And try to be wiser. And, my next question kind of ties into some of that a little bit, and that, you know, as entrepreneurs, we're doing things, we're testing, we're trying, we're making mistakes, and it can often lead to imposter syndrome, right? Of, well, I really shouldn't be doing this, or I'm not the right person, or how did I get to be at this point, or something like that. That just makes you like question who you are. And I'm curious how much that has shown up in your own entrepreneurial journey, and how do you work through it?
It That's a great question, and I think we all deal with that if you've had some moniker of success in your life, right? In that, whether it's in your professional life or your personal life, that there's always some aspect of that. And there are two things that come to mind on that. Is I think about, we joined the local chamber of commerce is one of the things that we've done, and so we had to start going to the chamber of commerce, and it was learning how to talk about the business without trying to sound, for lack of a better word, pompous about what we're doing. You want to be sincere and all that kind of stuff, but then you also are going, but is that accurate? And am I trying to be bigger than I am instead of just being who I am? And it comes down to, and sometimes again, we go back to this, you just got to take the leap.
Mhm.
There are times when I don't want to go out and glad hand and meet people, and by the time I get out there and do it, I'm happy I did. The thing that pops into mind, when I was a young kid, I would feign sickness a lot to get out of school.
Mhm.
And my mom caught on to it pretty early, and she'd look at me and go, look, just walk to school. You'll feel better by the time you get there. And that's kind of how you have to do it. Just walk to school. You'll feel better by the time you got there. She sent me to school
Mhm.
with the chickenpox by mistake one time, but we'll let that one go.
Oops. You're super spreader. Yeah, like I resonate with that so much. Just the whole get out there and be with your community and you start, but getting out the door sometimes is the
It's,
hardest part.
and the
Mhm.
thing about, here's the great thing about human nature. People are forgiving. I think, in kind, just by nature. And so no one expects you to be absolutely perfect, especially as perfect as you expect you to be. And you have to sometimes remember how graceful you are with other people and realize that people are going to give you the same grace.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So, when starting Orion 7, what was one of the most unexpected difficult parts? Like you mentioned marketing and wearing hats, but like, kind of like what was some challenges internally that you had to kind of get over?
I think it's part of the challenge we're going through right now is that it's never fast enough when you're the founder,
Mm.
right? You want it to go easier and faster. Really, I thought sometimes I would put out some great thought leadership and people would just flock to us in crickets. But that you'd put things out there and you think someone's going to pick up a phone and go, that was great. And sometimes people did. And some close friends of mine would go, that was a great article or that was great. And I'm like, great. You want to send me a check?
Mhm.
And so that's been the thing that you've got to have some patience on this too, is that it's not going to happen overnight. It's not the sitcom or the Hallmark movie that you watch that everything gets solved in 2 hours. It's going to be a challenge and it's going to test your determination to get this off the ground, especially when you're first starting out, right? It's
Mhm.
that first client. Where do I spend my money at the very beginning of this thing?
Yeah.
Do I go buy all the accounting software I need to track a business now, even though I don't have any business now? Or do I spend the money on advertising? Because there's only a limited amount of stuff that you can do. And so it's how you figure out where you stretch that type of thing and when you let go. And it's dealing sometimes with disappointment. We've gone out and talked to family and friends and said, hey, we could use some help. And they're like, oh, sounds like you have a great thing to do. Good luck to you.
So loving.
Yes. Yes.
We wish you nothing but luck. Let us know how it works out.
Yeah.
Right, right. That's always, it's like, all right, thanks, y'all. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I want to dive into a little bit of, some of the things you've created, like the customer difficulty index and the experience friction index. I'd love to hear more about what those actually are, how you use them, and how they've been beneficial to your clients.
So the customer difficulty index started off on a phone call with me and a bunch of leaders, and we were talking about quality. And I was like, you need to start looking at in the contact center business. What happens is, it, historically, is you listen to 3 or 5 phone calls of somebody a month and you score that on your quality matrix and you give a score out to these people. And I was like, one of the things that we should start doing from a agent standpoint is looking at it from how difficult that call was and start scoring this like an Olympic diving competition. You may execute this great, but your difficulty level was nothing. Or
Mhm.
you may have the most difficult call and you execute it greatly. You should get more points for that, right? And so it started off with that idea, and then it started evolving from there. And so it starts rating how difficult it is for customers to do business with you,
Hmm. Okay.
right? And trying to find those friction points and get a score. It is. We talk about things that aren't perfect yet. We are still iterating this whole thing to trying to get it to be a great foundation on that type of thing and how it works for both. We started it basically just from the agents standpoint is let's give them credit for the work that they do. Agents don't get enough credit for how hard things are. And we started off that way and then it evolved into, well, where's the pain point for the customer too? And so those two work hand in hand. One helps the agent, one starts measuring out where the customer friction points are. And then by correcting those, the idea here is how do you relate those to profitability and to revenue and the rest of that kind of stuff? Because what really is missing in customer experience and the whole ecosystem of customer experiences, we're a bunch of survey people and, we measure customer satisfaction, NPS and all this kind of stuff. We walk into an office, into a meeting going, hey, I've got all the scores, but nobody knows how those relate down to the bottom line. as an operator, that was always my frustration with it too, is that here's what I want to do. And I
Mhm.
want to move the bottom line needle because I always have said that I want my organization to be the most highly paid and high value organization in the company,
Hmm.
meaning that we earn our money plus.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so we needed to always relate that back to everything we were doing. How do we show what that value is? And
definitely.
in real numbers that the CFO could support, the CEO would understand, and all that kind of stuff. And so that's always been my approach to what we do on the customer care and CX side.
That's awesome. Having been a call center manager in my career, I 100% understand like everything you just said of like because some of those calls, no lie, they're hard, right? Because the situation is so unique, or like the policies that are in place may not allow for you to do something, even though like it really should be done. But it goes back to that friction piece that you were talking about. How have you seen that affect businesses once you've implemented that? How have you seen improvements there?
You know, some of it is it really builds trust. I've always looked at policy and procedure, especially when I was working with Redbox. I would go back to movie quotes and stuff like that. Is I would go back to an old Pirates of the Caribbean thing, is where they were talking about the rules of being a pirate, and they were more just guidelines.
Yes.
And I would say, I would look at people and go, look, these are guidelines. Yeah, I want you to be in these areas, but really what I want you to do is the right thing. Right. And by doing the right thing every time, we're going to build the trust and we're going to build the loyalty of our customers by doing that. Here's a great example of my days at Sprint PCS is we were outsourcing to India and people hated it. And at that time, a lot of people in the industry were giving the Indian kids American names, and they were telling them, don't tell them where you are and don't do this.
Hmm.
And I came and said, look, I'm not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to be honest about it. If we can't tell people we're doing this, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what's going to happen and I would talk I'd be over in India and talking to the guys and go, this is what I want you to do. You got to remember that you're an ambassador to the United States for everybody who doesn't know anything about India. You're the Indian ambassador for them. This is how they're going to learn about your country. They don't know anything about it. And so just be patient with it. And then they're going to ask you, where are you? And I don't want you to be embarrassed by it. What I want you to say is say exactly this. Say, I'm in India, but doesn't it sound like I'm next door? And that would immediately, what it did is it acknowledged that, yes, we are outsourcing this thing to India. We're not embarrassed by it. But then it turned it to, and here's the benefit of it. And then the next question I got, and the next question you asked him is, and how can I help you? Right.
Hmm.
And it just got rid of that whole problem, and it built the trust that we had with our customers. And it got rid of that. Let's have a debate about outsourcing. And it worked beautifully. And so that's how process and procedure, so many people wanted us to hide it. And I'm like, don't do that. People are smarter than that to begin with.
Mhm.
You just need to let's do the right thing. Let's just acknowledge where we're doing business.
Yeah, I love that idea about that honesty and transparency. Like we've all had those conversations with overseas support, and they clearly have a very strong Indian accent, and their name is Justin
Yeah.
or something. And you're like, I don't
That's
think
not,
so.
that's not going to,
No, no. And it almost became like oh, we got to hide this from our customers. But like, it's very obvious to the customer who does call in.
and then you start focusing on that, and it's
Yeah,
the wrong thing to focus on because accents and all the rest of that stuff. We live in a huge country with regional accents and immigrants and all their accents and stuff like that. We are a loving, caring organization that, as long as I can understand you and you can understand me, your accent is a non-issue.
exactly. Yeah,
Right. And that's what we
exactly.
focus on was let's understand what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You talk about trust being, the real growth engine. And I think what you've shared has been one real example. How do you help companies operationalize that idea?
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that you know, we were talking a little while ago about surveys, and NPS and CSAT and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Really, what you want to look at, in my opinion, is you want to look at the lifetime value of a customer, right? In customer care, what you should be doing is that if they have to come into the customer care organization or deal with your call center, did that change the way that they do business with you? Either make them more valuable or less valuable, and identify those things that drive either one of those two results from it, right? And then each company is going to be unique, and this is in determining what those are going to be. Right. And so, but the trust factor, customers want to be able to believe what you tell them. And so it's the follow through, it's the backup. Hey, I talked to Brian yesterday. He said this is going to happen. And you want someone to say, oh, I see where you talked to Brian. And that is absolutely what is going to happen. Even if they say, you know what, he went outside of policy, but we're going to back that up.
Mhm.
Right. And it may cost you a little bit in the time in that instance, but it will win you a lifetime customer whose value will outweigh whatever it is that you're doing. Right.
Yeah.
And so key to that, there are a lot of keys that come up with that is you have to have the systems in place that allow you to capture that information so that the next person knows what the conversation was, that you're following through, and that you can catch all that stuff on the follow through. All that builds that trust, and it adds to that value. But you want to be able to relate that back to things like lifetime value, and all that is kind of where my point of view has always been.
Yeah, I think trust is so important, right? Like as consumers, we want to be able to trust the companies we work with and the brands that we buy and support from. And as a business leader, right, we want that same trust. We want our customers to be able to trust us and what we do and how we operate and run our business, right? And clearly the customer experience side of things is something you've been studying and dove into for a very, very, very long time now. What's something you're seeing right now in the customer experience world that people should be paying attention to?
I think there's a shift in it. Is some of the people that I listen to and who I am reading from and all that kind of stuff, is they're really trying to put the systems in place that turn customer care instead of it, or customer experience, instead of it being a measurement thing, into being a framework into how to run your business. And I think that we're going to start to see that transition more and more. And I can't be happier about it. It's again, it's got to mean something, the stuff that you're doing, and growing the business and all that kind of stuff based off the experience, and being, every company says we're customer focused. And the question you have to ask if you're in the customer experience side of things is, are you really? And let's take a look at what you do that makes it more difficult, and then how you can grow your business by getting rid of that stuff. A prime example, and I wrote a short article about this, was I was going to my dermatologist, and went to the website, couldn't get through on the website to set the appointment. Then called their contact center. It was a centralized contact center. I couldn't, and all the connections didn't work, and we couldn't get it in, and all that kind of stuff. And the care I've always received from this dermatologist has been fantastic, but it became so difficult to do business with them. I immediately started looking for a new dermatologist, right? And so that's on the medical care side of it. But how many of those things are applied to retail or applied to
Yeah.
Yeah.
hospitality or any of the rest of that kind of stuff? Is, you get into a hotel, and your reservation, they tell you that we have no rooms. You're like, well, I have a reservation. How does
Oops.
that work out? Right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and maybe this is your first time staying with the company. And so you don't have all these points, and you haven't become a loyalty. So you're not the top priority. When I'm like, wow, this is the first time you're coming with me. I should make a big impression on you. I
Yes.
want you to come back.
Yeah, for sure. So on that, when you work with fast growing and mid-market companies, what else do they get wrong when it comes to customer experience?
A lot of times they get so locked up in things like they worry about themselves first. These young
Yeah.
entrepreneurs and all the rest of that kind of stuff are like, well, we can't do that. That's not what we do. And I'm like, well, that's what your customer wants you to do. Right. And they lose, and you see that. I think you especially see that in today's marketplace, as we've become less and less connected face to face with people, right? As things are all into this, I watch my kids and I watch my grandkids, and they're all, even at the dinner table, I have to insist that all these screens get put down. And but they all get into these screens, and you're texting and all that kind of stuff, and you lose that connection with humans. And while everyone's doing it, everyone has a desire for something else, to be connected and heard. And that's really sometimes what these young entrepreneurs are missing, is they aren't hearing what the customer wants. They're just trying to make it fast. And it doesn't always have to be fast. It has to be fast. It has to be right. It has to be quality. It has to be all these types of things. And that's where I think the mistake is they're losing that connection to understand what their customer's trying to do, and not necessarily exactly what they want to do. Is that
Right.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
I don't know
Definitely.
if I'll have to work on the wording on that one. That's a great question.
No, but I mean, I think it's very true of just, the speed is great, but if you do it, if you're doing speed for the sake of in front of everything else, it's not going to go very far, right? Like you can't get speed, and it's kind of like that triangle, right? The speed, the quality, and I forget the third one, but like you can't have fast and good. You can't have, there's all that triangle that goes through. You gotta balance it out somewhere in
Exactly.
there.
Like I always said, if you're doing things fast and you're doing it wrong, you're just doing it wrong for more people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Is slow down. Let's learn to do it right, and then we'll get fast and efficient.
Yeah. I know as for me, and it was something you mentioned earlier as like a founder, right? Like I want it done and I want it done yesterday, right? Like I'm almost curious to ask you, how do you work through that as a founder, yourself to go like, I have to slow down and let my team get this right, no
Yeah.
matter how much it pains me to sit there and like grind my gears because it takes too long,
You know, that's the key to it, is you've got to trust in the people that who you've brought on, right? Is they may not always do it exactly the way that you want to do, and so you focus on outcomes and not on process some
Mm-hmm.
of the time, right? And I have to do that. I have to do that with my own kids when they're working with me and stuff like that. Is I have to say, here's what we're trying to accomplish, and then get out of their way,
Yeah.
because I have a way that I think it should be done, but sometimes, especially these young kids are so smart
Yeah,
that
they are.
they look at it and they just see it so totally different, and it's better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so you have to get out of their way and just say, okay, here's what we're trying to accomplish. You get us there. And then and especially when you're a perfectionist and you're a control freak and you're all those things that entrepreneurs are, that's the hardest part of it. Right? Is just letting people do what you've asked them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you guys know that it works that way in marriage too. Is sometimes
Yes.
I don't know how many times I haven't loaded the dishwasher correctly, but you just wanted it loaded.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a pet peeve in our family, and it's one of my like, oh, I can't believe you're doing that, is in the winter I like to take scalding hot showers, which usually happens after dinner. Sean inevitably turns the hot water all the way on to wash the dishes, and
Yeah.
so I'm always turning it down because I'm like, I don't want to take a cold shower. And it's, yes, you have to work it out sometimes. Like it's conversation, it's communication, it's that it works in marriage, it works in friendships, it works in business relationships as
Absolutely.
well.
If you ever want to know exactly how I wouldn't do something, ask my wife to do it. Greta and I, it's exactly the opposite of what you ever thought you wanted. We've been married now. We've been together over 30 years. We've been married 25 years. And we still, after all this time, look at it and go, yeah, that's exactly the opposite of what I would have done.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely interesting to watch, and as we've worked together and done some things, it's like we've definitely had to like kind of do that same thing of like just step aside and let the other person go and trust that they're going to do it. Right.
Yeah.
And so just, kind of as we begin to wrap up here, just for people who are listening, and we talked about like a lot of them are starting businesses or very new into that. So for our people listening, if they're considering starting their own consulting or service-based business, what is one principle you'd tell them to anchor or to start with from day one?
Yeah, that's a great question. The number one thing I would anchor it on is it's gotta be reflective of you, right? That especially in the consulting space of it, this consulting is a relationship based type business, and you've got to be who you are, when we first began this journey, we were throwing a wide net, right? We were like, because of the internet and all that kind of stuff, we can work with people anywhere. And one of the consultants and bring people in to help you that are smarter than you. One of the guys and close advisors to us said, Brian, your strength is this one-on-one, and you need to be focused on building from there. And so we brought our net back in, and now because we're in the Phoenix area, the Phoenix area is huge. It's the 5th largest city in the country, but we're really trying to concentrate our work right now on companies that are based here in the Phoenix Valley. And we think it's because we can build this type of relationship, and then people get to know who we are and we get to know who they are, instead of it being, an arm's length thing from 1,000 miles away where we haven't built that type of relationship with. And that's how we're looking at it.
Yeah. So if someone is interested in learning about you and what you do at Orion 7 Solutions,
Yeah, the
how can they get in
seven's
touch?
important because there's 7 of us, right? I have 5 kids,
I
my wife and I.
I wonder that when I first saw your company name, I was like, I wonder what the story is with 7. But then when you said you had 5 kids, I was like,
Yeah,
I bet
but
it's the
what we
kids.
did
Yep.
is just real quick is the reason we call it what we call it is when we were pregnant with our 5th child, and I was young and thinking I needed to have a tattoo. And so I went and I decided to put a star and moon on my arms, and it represents what sailors navigated by. And so the 5 stars represent my kids, and the moon represents my wife, and it's what I navigate by. And so when we were naming the company, we wanted a celestial body because of the art that sit on my
Yeah.
shoulder. And so came up with Orion, then 7 because there's 7 of us, and solutions. It's what every consultant firm said. And the
Right.
URL was we could get the .com.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go.
That's even better. Yeah. No, I love it. I love the meaning behind your company, and I love how family oriented you are in your business. We like into that as well. So how does someone get in touch with you? What's the
They can
best
reach out
place?
to me directly. I have a simple email address. I'm Brian at Orion7solutions.com. Feel free to email me. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn, so just hit me up there. And I think those are the 2 of the best ways to get a hold of us.
Fantastic. And for those, because I know there's a number of different ways to spell Brian, it's Brian at
That's correct. It's the
Orion7solutions.com,
correct
right?
spelling for Brian.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Brian, this was a fantastic discussion, man. I loved having the conversation and just hearing the story, and appreciate your time. And, loved having you on the show. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for reaching out, and I look forward to getting to build our relationship and learning more about you guys and stuff like that. So we will definitely be in touch off and on, outside of the podcast.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, guys.